the the Coalition for Digital Environmental Sustainability, CODES. My name is Robert Opp. I'm the Chief Digital Officer for UNDP. We're one of the co-sponsoring hosts for the roundtable, along with our other excellent colleagues. The purpose of this roundtable is to discuss and receive feedback on the latest consolidated draft of the CODES Action Plan for Sustainable Planet in the Digital Age. And as many of you know, this work that we're doing with CODES also comes under the auspices of the Secretary General's Roadmap for Digital Cooperation. So you're going to be hearing about all of those things from a list of speakers that we have joining us from the UN Secretariat, from our CODES co-sponsor organizations as well. And we have a packed agenda because we want to get through the action plan point by point. So we will get rolling now. And the first speaker that I'll turn to is the Acting Envoy for Technology from the UN Secretariat, Assistant Secretary General Maria Francesca Spatolizano. Francesca, please, over to you to open us up.
Thank you very much, Rob. And dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to participate in this roundtable and share some remarks, indeed, from the perspective of the Office of the Tech Envoy at the UN. The experience we all had in the last 2 years during the COVID pandemic has brought home the point that while digital technologies hold great promise and potential, of course, we must pay urgent heed to the risks and challenges that they represent at the same time. And nowhere is that more evident than in the environmental sustainability, where our increasing dependence on digital technology has profound environmental consequences. So the environment digital nexus perfectly encapsulates the critical need for greater digital cooperation and global steerage. Hence the role to be played by the international community and the UN, working with multi-stakeholder partners like all of you. Through the Secretary General's Roadmap for Digital Cooperation, and now reinforced in his Common Agenda report, the United Nations have urgently called for global action to address digital challenges. Your work so far to implement the Digital Cooperation Roadmap has been exemplary, and particularly your commitment to inclusive and engaged multi-stakeholder. The Secretary General has now also called, this is very important, also called for a global digital compact as an outcome of his Summit of the Futures foreseen for September next year. The compact is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to bring together member states, private sector, civil society, to reach an understanding on the key principles for a more open, free, and secure digital future for all. Here in New York, member states are beginning discussions on how to realize the common agenda, including the digital compact. And we are also preparing the ground to listen and to consult with global processes, organizations, and coalitions on what exactly this digital future they want should look like, and thus what the digital compact should contain. I cannot stress more how important it is that CODES sees this opportunity and you feed your work into the UN Compact, using it as a vehicle to call for greater awareness of the nexus between digitalization and its environmental impact, as well as forge stronger collaborative actions towards digital environmental sustainability. You may wish to consider, I suggest that you really look into this, you may wish to consider putting forward the important underlying principles as well as key action-oriented commitments that could become the basis for the compact. Your multi-stakeholder community is a strong coalition to advocate for the same principles and elements, and ensuring that this is given the much needed attention it deserves at the Summit of the Futures next year. Finally, and possibly most important, I want to stress that your broader work to identify concrete actions, good practices, and real ways of assisting countries will help promote real change on the ground and in people's lives. Digital transformation and environmental protection cannot be considered as two sequential stages, but both processes should be advanced simultaneously, hand in hand, if you wish. As such, I count on CODES to play a leading role in collecting referential examples around the world so as to promote environmentally sustainable digitalization, especially in the developing world. And this can also feed into other work streams of the roadmap that the UN and other actors are pursuing. For instance, underlying the importance of data-based environmental monitoring shows the important role of CODES as a player in issues around data management. And in the same way, global connectivity and capacity building efforts must ultimately be environmentally sustainable in the long run. And I'm especially appreciative, indeed, of my UN colleagues from UNDP and UNEP strong partnership and excellent work in this area. So to conclude, I congratulate CODES on all the good work that you have done so far. Your efforts and your action plan aimed at consolidating this work stream as part of the Secretary General's roadmap and overall vision for the digital future are deeply appreciated. And I look forward to its finalization and to working closely with you on the next steps. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, ASG Spatolizano. Francesca, we really do appreciate your support along the way in all of this. So thank you for the words of context, and I think the Global Digital Compact is a huge opportunity for all of us interested in this space. Our next speaker we'll turn to is Dirk Messner, President of the German Environment Agency. Dirk is going to give a sense of where we are on the journey of codes and where we're headed next. Dirk, over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rob. So some introductory remarks and a welcome, of course, in the name of the co-organizers of this workshop to all of you, colleagues and friends, and of course to Maria Francesca. Thank you very much for all the support which you are giving to us and all the pushes which you and your team are organizing to push us forward in this journey, which is so important. So welcome to our discussion at the Action Plan for a Sustainable Planet in the Digital Age. The Action Plan, as you know, has been developed by the co-champions of CODES, and those are UNEP, UNDP, the International Science Council, Future Earth, the Ministry for Environment and Forestry of Kenya, and my own organization, the German Environment Agency. And you might remember, as Maria Francesca already mentioned, a roundtable which we organized last year in order to create a joint understanding of interactions between the two, what we understand as the two major transformations of our time, the digital and the sustainability transformation. We thank you all for your engagement during the last month and these discussions and joint learning processes. As you know, and Maria Francesca, you already mentioned this, no? The action plan which we are presenting today seeks to contribute to the digital cooperation processes of the Secretary General of the United Nations. And we cooperate closely with your office, Maria Francesca, of the United Nations Tech Envoy. We will present, and I think this is an important message to all of us and hopefully something which will make us even more engaged. We will present the action plan in early March in the context of UNEA, the UN Environmental Assembly, as a side event. And this is a great opportunity for us, I think, as a community, and a privilege actually, to discuss the digital dimensions of sustainability center stage at UNEA, where people from around the globe, as you know, in the field of sustainability will come together. So we have a chance to build the bridges, and this is one of the major ideas of CODES, to build the bridges between the tech, the digital, and the environmental communities. The overall and basic idea of coders and our community, of the debates which we have been having with all of you, is to develop our thinking and knowledge about pathways to implement the SDGs further, taking, as Maria Francesca said, taking into account the far-reaching digital transformations. And we think actually we are all making progress in this regard. It's very interesting to see, and you can also read this in our action plan, that the number of actors and networks working at the digital sustainability interfaces has been exploding during the last 2 to 3 years. David, I'm seeing you in front of me. When we started to debate about these bridges needed 2 or 3 years ago, we saw only a few actors around the globe focusing on this kind of interfaces. The number of actors is growing, and this is very important for us. So today we are asking again for your concrete feedback. We already received many reactions from you, the coders community, on the action plan during the last 2 weeks, and we will report back how this has been perceived. And we thank you already for that. And we are looking forward now to mobilize our and your collective intelligence during the next 90 minutes to discuss the action plan draft, because there is still some time to improve before we present the document in the context of UNEA. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Dirk. And now we're actually going to jump into an overview of the framework of the action plan. And to give us the presentation on the framework, we have Marcel Dorsch, Senior Researcher, Digital Change and Sustainability Transformation at UBA, the German Environment Agency. Marcel, over to you, please.
Thank you, Rob. So wonderful. It's great to be here and to present our current structure and framework with the main ingredients of our current action plan and to discuss it with the broader community today. This is more or less the basic structure of the action plan, of the document itself. I hope most of you had a chance to take a look at it more in depth. The action plan is 3 chapters, more or less. We have an introduction giving a broader context. The main part is chapter 2, and I will jump into that in a minute with the 3 shifts we propose for better understanding and going into action regarding our topic. Each shift is then conceptually underlined with 6 strategic priorities for each shift. And we have a concluding chapter 3 where we highlight 12 impact initiatives, or for now proposals for 12 concrete catalytic impact initiatives to you today. Chapter 1, of course, gives a broader overview on the topic itself and why we are not yet on track and why we definitely need to actively shape digital transformations to build our sustainable futures. We also highlight, of course, all of your efforts and stress the collective intelligence process we went through with all of you, with the coders community at large. And of course, we highlight what the action plan is all about, to seize an opportunity. So the action plan offers a key narrative, the 3 shifts, and of course, many key recommendations. The action plan speaks to different actors in a global perspective. This is important characteristic too, and the action plan contributes, as said already, to important political processes. I will just briefly show this slide. It's in the action plan as well. It's just a draft graphic. Of course, we heavily look back on the 2030 agenda and its goals as a key global goals framework. Codes was implemented as a reaction and mandated by the roadmap process for global digital cooperation. And of course, our common agenda text is also a very important reference for our processes. As Dirk already mentioned, we want to have impact in the years to come with this action plan. We will present it at the first time publicly at UNEA 5.2 in 1 month. We want to apply for a side event at Stockholm Plus 52. Next year will be an important event, of course, the already mentioned Summit of the Future in the Common Agenda process. And as you heard already, the Global Digital Compact is a very important political opportunity window for us to talk to. The 3 shifts is our key rationale we offer to identify 3 important areas for action, more or less. The shift 1, aligning vision, values, and objectives. The message is here to build the foundations to align digital with sustainability transformation. The second shift, sustainable digitalization, is really about making digitalization itself sustainable. The third shift is a call to foster digital innovation for sustainability, for our common sustainability goals and agendas. And important to highlight, every shift needs action now. We have identified 6 strategic priorities in each of these shifts. We highlight 6 enablers that needs to be provided. We highlighted 6 problem areas that needs to be addressed urgently. And we highlighted 6 specific innovations to foster. The third chapter has some key messages, of course, some high-level conclusions on our common action plan process and our common efforts for collective action in the future. And importantly, also for feedback today, it also includes these next steps, these currently 12 specific proposals for catalytic impact initiatives of global relevance. Thanks for now.
Thank you so much, Marcel. Now, as Dirk mentioned, we have already gathered inputs on this at a first roundtable, but also in between the sessions and just before this session, we sent you a link through the Spark Blue platform and out to the mailing list that we had of a tool that we use to collect more inputs. And these are all important signals to us for what's on your mind. And to walk us through this tool, the results that we came from the collection of ideas and the thought exchange that happened before, Eliane Ubalijoro, Global Hub Director for the Future Earth Canada and Executive Director of the Sustainability in the Digital Age Initiative, will present the results. Eliane, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Rob. So it's a real pleasure to be here with all of you today. So it's exciting to have over 97 participants right now here on the call. But this here, I have lots of exciting news to share with all of you. So the Thought Exchange had 126 participants, and all of you shared 80 thoughts that were rated 743 ratings. So this is very exciting because interestingly, we've had a great engagement with the community of experts all over the world, but for particularly this thought exchange, 46% of respondents had not yet participated in any event or opportunity for input yet. So it's really great to have these new additional inputs and fresh eyes on the action plan. So we thank you very much for your input. In terms of high-level outcomes, the highest ranked thoughts were generally on the use of digital technologies for climate mitigation, which received the highest rank. And the following, which have the same rank in terms of star ratings, are the importance of capacity building and relevance of solutions, financing mechanisms, the need for a just transition, and elements of shift 1, which is on aligning vision, values, and objectives, as Rob Marcel had spoken to us about it before Rob came on. So thoughts generally stress the importance of cross-sectoral work and interdisciplinary collaboration mechanisms. The highest number of thoughts submitted around a specific topic or theme, more on the implementation process of the action plan itself, which we will look at carefully as we integrate these inputs. Second, we had aspects of shift 2 in particular, which is around sustainable digitalization. So the importance of how do we ensure that how we use digitalization in itself is sustainable is critical to many of you, and we really thank you for that input. And third is capacity building and local relevance and ownership of this work. And so this was important for us, having thoughts coming from all over the world in terms of your contribution. So we thank you for all these thoughts that were shared. So we received some specific inputs on clarifying entry points for operationalizing the action plan itself. We will have an opportunity to discuss this further today when we look at impact initiatives, and we will run another thought exchange in the coming weeks on this particular topic to capture the best process for engaging the community towards action. So a summary of these inputs will be shared on the SparkBlue platform after this roundtable, and we really encourage you to look at them as it's very interactive. And I would like now to pass it back to Marcel to discuss the action plan in more detail.
Thanks, Elaine. Now I will guide you briefly through the general rationale of each shift. And after each shift, we will have a quick Mentimeter exercise with David. So this is just an overview about the 3 shifts and the 6 strategic priorities for each shift. Shift 1 is really about the aligning digital transformation and sustainability transformations as such. So align the vision, the values, and the objectives of the digital age with sustainable development. The goal is here to really create a broad societal actor-wide update to approach digital transformation and sustainability transformation in concert, reorienting the purpose of digital change towards our common 2030 agenda and other similar frameworks. The message here is we have to build the foundations for strong action. And this is the list of the 6 strategic priorities we highlighted here. We call them the 6 enablers. And it's really about building this foundational effort, connecting communities and transformations, as I said already, build digital competencies in a large field of different actors in research and science. It's really about also the bureaucracies, for example, understanding digital change as such to better govern them. Third, harnessing science and system thinking. So taking advantage of the new possibilities in every disciplines, in synthesizing knowledge, in better understanding societal economic systems. Fourth, advance multilateral action. So we really need a hard push, getting a better grasp in organizing digital change on a global level with strong institutions and frameworks. Fourth point, this is not enough. We also need to build front-runner coalitions, diverse coalitions of local actors, of scientists, of entrepreneurs. Sixth, we of course have a set of different norms and standards we need to adopt to really build the framework and the foundation we need to further develop. David?
Great, thank you so much, Marcel, and thank you to all colleagues online. As Dirk mentioned, we're all about collective intelligence and inclusion and trying to get as much feedback from the community as possible. So we're going to run a Mentimeter poll now, and we're going to do 2 things. First of all, we want to understand how much support there is for these 6 strategic priorities. So you're going to be able to vote your level of support. And then we'll be asking, what are the gaps? What needs to be included? What's missing? So you'll have a chance to also then, if you think there's a key gap, put that gap into the Mentimeter. So I'm going to start sharing the Mentimeter, and I'll give you the connection information in just 1 minute. Okay, so I hope everybody can see the Mentimeter. Of course, I cannot see the code because it is being hidden, of course, by the Zoom interface. So if a colleague wouldn't mind just verbally mentioning what the code is, the website for Mentimeter is www.menti.com, and there is a connection code. Marcel, if you can read that connection code off, that would be great.
It's 534054446.
Thank you so much, Marcel. So I'll give colleagues a chance to connect. That code will be placed into the chat. Marcel, if you could place it in the chat, that would be great. There should also be a direct connection link in the chat. So there's 2 different ways to access it. So we'll give colleagues another 30 seconds to connect into the Mentimeter. This is a really important tool to get your feedback, as I mentioned, and we've been doing these kind of polls each roundtable and each time we engage with the community. So it's really important that you connect in and share your feedback. The other way of sharing feedback, as Elian mentioned, we've been using the Thought Exchange to collect feedback, but we're also using a Google Doc to collect very specific feedback. If there is a fact you want to challenge, if there's a reference that's missing, if there's an initiative that's missing, we're also using the Google Doc to collect information. That Google Doc can be found through the Thought Exchange link. So we'll make sure to put the Thought Exchange link in the chat as well. And we will keep that Thought Exchange open until the 12th of February. So we'll continue collecting feedback after this session using the Thought Exchange and the Google Doc. So I can see we have a number of colleagues now in the Mentimeter. Last time we'll read this out. So again, the website is www.menti.com, MENTI.com. And Marcel, the code is
5340546.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I think most people are now across. So let's kick this survey off. So Marcel talked about shift one, aligning the visions, values, and objectives between sustainability and digital transformation. And as you see there, we have these 6 different strategic priorities. What we'd like to know from you is how strongly do you support these 6? Where do you stand now in terms of the strength of your support? So if you could start to vote on all 6, just giving us a sense. Do you strongly support the initiative? Do you weakly support it? Are you somewhere in between? We need to get a sense, how strongly and what kind of consensus there is for these different initiatives, so we can then start to improve them. So if colleagues can go through their screens and start to vote now, that would be fantastic. And this could be, we may need to explain things better, or it may be that you disagree with something. But I can see there's actually quite a good level of support for most of them. It may be that building frontrunner coalitions. I still think building frontrunner coalitions is a really important initiative. So hopefully there will be some strength for that. Maybe it's not well described, or maybe people have other ideas. We'll see. But it looks like from the results, we're getting 4.1 on average across all 6 is actually quite strong, which is fantastic. And you can obviously then see where the different ones lie. So what we're going to do now, give you a few more seconds to finish. The next slide will be asking, what would you add if you could change anything? What's the single most important thing that you would change? And so you're going to get a chance now to give us, again, feedback on new ideas that you may have. If we've missed something, for example, I'd love to know why building front-runner coalitions is not scoring as high as the others. So please, in the next slide, let us know. What would you change about that one, or what would you add to this strategic frameworks? So I'm going to shift now to the next slide, and this is now your chance to talk about anything that's missing or anything you want to raise in these 6 priorities that you'd like to communicate to the team. So please, you can put in as many ideas as you want. They're going to appear on the screen as we go, but it would be great to hear from you. What you have in mind in terms of how to improve the current framework. Yes, setting specific quantitative goals for these collaborations. I think that is a really important idea. We've been struggling with exactly that, but it is something we really like to do. The marketing plan as well, fantastic idea. There's so many good ideas coming in, and we've got some clarity now on why the frontrunner coalitions need to be improved. Yeah, this is good. Okay, this is fantastic, colleagues. Keep these ideas coming in. I can see measurement and scoring and ways to actually track change is coming in a few different times. Prioritization is coming in. Change of business models. Again, this has been an issue that we've been talking about a lot in the coalition and different things, and we may need to revisit how that is addressed across the document. But this is great. Wonderful feedback coming in. Please let it keep flowing in. We'll be collecting all of this and using it to reflect on how to revise or how to refine these 6 strategic priorities. I can see the rate of inputs is starting to slow down, so maybe I'll stop there and we'll pass it back to Marcel to continue with the presentation on the second shift. Marcel?
Wonderful, great to see all the feedback coming in. I will continue with shift 2 very briefly. This shift is really about sustainable digitalization. So ensuring inherently sustainable digitalization, the whole digital backbone and infrastructures to really mitigate negative environmental and social impacts at all. So building these inclusive and environmentally sustainable infrastructures, standards, and safeguards is key here. The main message is leave the unsustainable path with vigor towards, of course, zero emissions, circularity, access, and empowerment. The strategic priorities, and we discussed that a lot too, are more or less grouped around 6 problems. So this is a problem focus. It's interesting to hear what you think about that. We highlight 6 problems. Of course, the question of energy use and the emissions related to digital infrastructure. Big topic. Second, the material base. So all the rare earth metals, for example, that are used, the whole supply chain, all these material issues are very relevant from our perspective, and of course your perspective as well. Third, consumption. The whole thing of these technologies and practices that accelerate consumption need to be addressed. Fourth, a rather new problem we decided to put in now is misinformation as an interesting and important issue, of course. So to prevent the amplification of misinformation, false information, disinformation about sustainability topics, environmental problems, etc. Fifth, important matter, of course, digital divides. Closing all the divides, of course, in an environmentally and socially sustainable manner. Gender divides, access to technology, to infrastructures, etc. within and between societies. And sixth, the last point, we really thought it's important to address all the different rights violations. So protecting human rights, civil rights, environmental rights, having this as a key problem focus to mitigate is really key. David.
Great, thank you, colleagues. We're going to shift back to our Mentimeter to do a poll of the latest 6 problems that Marcel has just shared. Now, please keep in mind, these are the problems that you identified in the various input processes. So this is what, we're trying to make sense of everything that we received from you and put it into a strategic framework, which is both strategic but somewhat selective, and it's a very difficult balancing act to achieve. So I'm going to shift it now. Hopefully everybody can see my screen to the next poll. Okay, so we are in the next poll. Marcel, can you confirm that if you're inside the poll, is it working now?
It works. It works.
Okay, great. So we'll let colleagues spend a bit more time sending their feedback into the poll. It's great to see that energy and emissions has such a strong support. I'm a bit surprised that the misinformation side of things is low on that list. I think, Marcel, there was a question from Allison about the material base. And here we're talking about both the inputs to digital technology, as you say, some of the materials, metals, and rare earths that go into ICT, but also some of the e-waste that comes out of it. The whole material base of digital technologies needs to be managed in a circular way. And that's what that's getting to. Misinformation is really about the amplification of misinformation about the environment, about climate, about different sustainability topics. And we see this increasingly as a major problem in the sector. And there is a need to mitigate or prevent the amplification of misinformation that links to these topics So that's what that's talking about. And I'd love to know in the next slide why that's not being, why there's a problem there in terms of weaker support compared to the other ones. So let's move in there. If everybody has voted here, let's move in now to the feedback section. What's missing from Shift 2, if anything? There doesn't have to be anything missing. And if there's nothing missing, you can just tell us it's great. But if there is something, here's your chance now to give us that feedback. Life cycle thinking, yes, exactly. And I think this is one of those things where we've talked a lot about circular economy in the next shift, and I think that's what touches upon life cycle thinking. But hopefully, exactly, we can see that there's always going to be an inherent amount of kind of overlap between the mitigation of risks and impacts in Shift 2 and the innovations needed to drive forward sustainability in Shift 3. And we've struggled with that kind of overlap, but hopefully between Shift 2 and Shift 3, we'll address most of these issues. Let's keep these ideas flowing in. I'd love to know who's talking about asteroid mining. I have my guesses, but this is great to see all these suggestions coming in. Connecting the new urban agenda with the nexus, that's an important one. I think that's missing right now. It's good to see that that's been identified, and we'll have to work on that one. How digital tech can impact child mental health and behavior, another huge one. Have to figure out how exactly to touch on that. But it's a big one. Great. These are all excellent ideas coming in. Let this flow for a couple more seconds, and then I'll shift it back to Marcel to continue the final presentation on Shift 3. I can see a few different comments about the urban agenda connection. Clearly an area that we need to address. Now, algorithmic bias and fairness, I believe that is in Shift 2. If we look at the details of the different problems, bias is certainly there, and I think equity and fairness is there, but we'll double check on that one because you say it's a big one. These are fantastic, excellent feedback. Let's stop the flow of feedback on this shift and send it back to Marcel for Shift 3.
Great, really wonderful to see all the feedback coming in. I will briefly guide you through the last shift, Shift 3. And this is on digital sustainability. So the idea is really to direct, maybe redirect and incentivize digital innovations towards sustainability. So thinking about all the different applications, innovations, technologies, usages that can be built up and incentivized to really reach our sustainability goals and bring forward our sustainability agenda. So harnessing digitalization to accelerate and scale sustainability, given the little time we have left for some of our environmental and sustainability problems. Thinking, of course, about new systemic incentives, social practices, business models, etc. And the big message here is to start an innovation decade for really strong sustainability action with all the technological, societal, digital means we have on the table. These 6 strategic priorities in the Shift 3 are 6 innovations. It's a little bit of a different perspective. There are some links to other topics, of course, but these are really 6 key innovation areas, thematic areas we wanted to highlight with your input. And the first is the planetary digital twin. This is the buzzword of it. It captures, all the innovations to measure, monitor, safeguard, model the health of the planet, biosphere, all the interactions with the economic and social systems. Second, of course, a strong emphasis on a sustainable circular economy. One of the key innovation areas, of course, to think in circles, to organize in circles, to build another model of economic thinking and practice. A big focus for important innovations. Third, sustainable consumption. Another very important thing, innovations to empower sustainable lifestyles, behaviors, new forms of collaboration, etc. Fourth, the knowledge commons. So here we think about innovations towards a really broadly accessible knowledge commons, what we can gain from that, from this really big knowledge revolution, this important step forward globally. Fifth, governance breakthroughs. Of course, there are many ways where we could think about innovations towards a revolution in networked, agile and collaborative governance forms. Also thinking about the polycentric networks of different actors in the environmental realm, in the sustainability realm, connecting the local to the global forums, etc. Important innovation area. And six, last not least, the access revolution. So another big vision here, really to prioritize actions to make digital innovations for the whole of society. So for the many, broadly accessible for the many. This is the key issue here. David.
Thank you very much, Marcel. We're going to go back to the Mentimeter now. Give me 10 seconds. Okay, hopefully colleagues can now see we're in shift 3, innovate, and we've got the six strategic actions as strategic priorities in the list. So please commence your voting or your feedback on the level of support for each of these initiatives. And hopefully they're fairly straightforward. Just to clarify, the idea with the planetary digital twin, I mean, ultimately that's the outcome we're aiming to achieve, right? How do we, as Marcel mentioned, how do we measure, monitor, and model planetary sustainability using all of these digital technologies? How do we get all the data and analytics we need to then plug into the circular economy and to take better decisions in real time? So that includes a whole series of interventions stemming right from data to standards to the infrastructure, but ultimately, how do we get to the point where we can monitor the vital signs of the Earth in real time using these tools and technologies? But I can see that planetary digital twin is not as high as the other interventions, so it'll be interesting to understand from the next slide why that is the case and what we could do to improve that. I can see the other interventions, but they've got an average of about 4.3% across, 4.3 across all 6, which is quite high, which is great to see. And we're going to switch now to the next slide to get your feedback. What's missing, or can you add some further clarity? Why is digital planetary twin getting voted down? I'm very curious to understand why that's the case. So here comes the next slide with the chance for feedback. Thank you so much, colleagues. Lots of excellent feedback coming in. I'm understanding more about some of the issues on digital twin. I can see a lot of ideas coming in on that and some of the other ones, which is great. Scaling of innovations is important, is not often focused. We'll have to get some more understanding of that one. I think that's where we get into the impact initiatives. How do we take these broad priorities and then focus them into some kind of initiative? So hopefully we're going to answer that question coming in the final chapter or the final section, but you'll let us know if we're successful or not in actually doing that kind of focus. But this is great. Thank you again for all this wonderful feedback. I think we will pass it now back to, if I'm not mistaken, Rob, and we'll go now into the Q&A part of the Zoom so we can answer any specific questions you had about the first part of the report. So Rob, back to you.
Thank you, David, and thanks also to Marcel for taking us through that. And David, sometimes I think you missed part of your calling as a sportscaster because you do such a great job of the live calling of the Mentimeter results. It's amazing. So We're just going to have a few minutes for Q&A now before we move on to the next section. There have been some questions put in the Q&A, but I would continue to ask you to put your questions there. If you'd like to ask any of the people that are in this call from the host co-sponsoring organizations for codes. But there is one that is in the Q&A that it's about misinformation. And David, I'm just wondering if I can turn it back to you, because Catherine Foster was saying that misinformation needs explaining. Perhaps it's more about the complex business models, cross-border, cross-sectoral impacts, and lack of measurement capacity. But what are your views on that? And then after David, we could perhaps ask any of the other panelists as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with Catherine. I mean, misinformation ultimately is a question of what's the underlying business model that these different platforms are using. And the problem right now is the business models actually promote engagement, and they tend to promote a certain kind of engagement, which is based on either, outrage, or straight up metrics around engagement, even if that information is, of poor quality or unverified. So I think it's a bit of that's the underlying root cause, is the business model. And I think the question we're trying to understand in that particular shift is, how do we change that business model to prevent that information from being amplified? I think there's also a question of simply what are the responsibilities that platforms have to verify information on those platforms, especially when it is of a environmental, climate, or otherwise sustainability topic. So how can we get more systematic flagging of misinformation, and how can we get it taken off? So I suspect it's sort of two core issues there. But Catherine would be happy to take further feedback through the Google Doc. And let me just answer, I think Richard has a question about how do we receive ideas for further initiatives. In the Google Doc itself, there's a number of annexes which try to list what's going on per shift. So Annex 1 is about shift 1, and Annex 2 is about shift 2, and Annex 3 is about shift 3. That's the place to add further ideas and initiatives that we should be listing in that annex, and the annex to really reflect who's doing what in this space. So Richard, I would say that through the Google Doc, if you could put your inputs there, that would be great.
Great, thank you. Did anyone else want to add to that? Okay, Eliane.
So on the issue of misinformation, I think we live in a world where the urgency of belonging is so present, and the accelerated technological change has people feeling marginalized. And it's, how do we ensure that we're creating a space that welcomes all, that is trusted, and that has authentication and transparency process that automate the veracity of what is being shared. And the ethos of what we're bringing into Web 3.0 is really critical. And so how we collaborate moving forward to live our interconnectedness and ensure that we all understand the importance of why we're all in it together is very critical as we move forward. And that's why also inclusive innovation that brings all parts of the world to contribute to this space is so critical. So just saying, this is a very critical space that we need to continue to explore. And I really just appreciate Catherine's comment on this.
Great, thank you, Eliane. There's another question in here from Sally, talking about the modernization of the approach to software development and why is this fundamental component excluded? I have to confess, I'm not exactly sure which aspect, Sally, you're asking about. Is it the approach toward making software less energy intensive in hardware interaction? Or is it something else? But I wanted to send this back also to the panelists to see if anyone wanted to comment on that question.
Rob, I also think Dirk had something to say around misinformation, and I really wanted to hear that.
Oh, my apologies, Dirk. Let's jump back to that then while you consider the software question. Dirk, please.
Rob, if you allow me, I will look at the second question now, because
Sure.
Eliane gave a very good answer already. I think looking at software and the responsibility of people producing and driving and developing further software, we have two things in mind. On the one hand side, it is a question of responsibility regarding the resource impacts, the energy impacts of producing different kind of softwares. And there are major differences. And on the other hand side, it is as software is gaining such an important, Eliane, this was your point, no? So shifting dialogues, shifting access to knowledge, shifting access to data, no? AI-driven discourses, no? So the responsibility of those developing this kind of softwares is huge. And therefore, we are starting the debate of having something like an ethical code for people being in these driver's seats.
Great, thank you, Dirk. I want to address a question that has been left here by Pierre. And his question is, how focused is codes on environmental sustainability in comparison to overall sustainability? Is UNDESA handling the other pillars of sustainability? And actually for that, we have the perfect person to answer, because the Assistant Secretary General Spatolizano is also currently double-hatting responsibility in DESA. So Francesca, I'm wondering if I could ask you to respond to that question.
Yes, thank you very much for this question. In fact, it is very important to keep in mind that sustainability is made of different aspects, pillars as we call them, and the economic aspects and the social aspects are equally important as the environmental aspects. So now DESA is a Department of Economic and Social Affairs by definition, so we do work on those social and economic aspects of the sustainability goals very much, and we do this in many formats. Naturally, we support the intergovernmental work, which is the proper of the UN to pursue the achievement of the SDGs in all its 17 goals, and more broadly, I should say, the Agenda 2030. I want to highlight one of the cross-cutting principles, which is leave no one behind of this Agenda 2030, is part of what we do. And it also applies, obviously, to the digital aspects of the work, because access to digital has become, obviously, part of a broader sense of fairness or equitable opportunities. So if you don't have access to digital world, you risk to be left behind in other ways. You cannot access say public administration processes which would give you, your access to your health system or your financial opportunities, and so on and so forth, not to mention education. But going back to DESA does, for instance, in the Common Agenda, is called also to explore new frontiers of the social and economic policy making. I mentioned one for all, which is called, that's a line of thought, which is called the Beyond GDP. GDP is a measurement of economic progress of a country, and now we are trying, together with other parts of the UN, of course, and Rob knows very well, trying to go beyond that and measure also what it means for the well-being of people to count in environmental dimensions and social services as part of what it means to live in a given country as opposed to another country, and whether only the economic aspect matter or not. And probably you can imagine how complex it is to measure these other dimensions, but this is what we are trying to do as well. So just to continue with what I was saying briefly, we do this work in the intergovernmental processes of the UN, but we do it also through many other networks, and open this debate, this kind of reflections to the rest of the stakeholders. So we do through many forums which deal with the social and economic aspects of sustainability, where everybody is invited to participate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Francesca. And I think we'll take one more question now. We'll continue to try to answer the other ones that we haven't reached in the Q&A function. But I was actually going to mention this later on in the seminar, but actually since we've been asked the question a couple times already, I wanted to highlight the questions about how will the launch occur at UNEA 5.2, and what does it mean in terms of the process for our common agenda. And for that, I think, could I, David, maybe turn to you for reflections first on both how the launch is going to look, the side event at UNEA, and then how this leads up to the common agenda.
Sure, thanks so much, Rob. So Marcel is going to put the link to the registration for UNEA into the chat. It's on March 2nd. It'll be an hour-and-a-half event. And basically what we plan to do is present the action plan after we've refined it based on this feedback to member states and to other stakeholders of UNEA, again, to get feedback on the direction that it has taken and further refinement that has to happen. I think the codes community has been fantastic to help shape this, to give it, give it legs and to give it all these ideas. But it is essential that we also now increasingly engage all member states in this action plan and really reflect some of their priorities and needs as we continue to develop it. So it's going to be a presentation, as I said, and it's really about getting feedback, again, getting feedback from member states and other UNEA stakeholders. And it'll be an open session, so it'll be a virtual session, very much like this one. But the emphasis is really on getting, as I said, getting member states to engage and to really share their perspectives on this action plan. Is it in the direction that is meeting their needs, and how do we continue to refine it? And the hope really is to spark a conversation on implementation, right? So if there's good agreement on these priorities and on these shifts, how do we start to implement this in a systematic way? And how do we begin to take these priorities and inject them into this digital compact that was mentioned earlier? And that's really has to be the North Star. How do we begin to place sustainability as one of the core pillars in that new digital compact? And how do we use the action plan to begin to rally around some big ideas to place them into the digital compact, but also just to get some further consolidation and coordination of what's already happening at the field. As Dirk mentioned, the number of initiatives, as you'll see in the annex, the annexes are proliferating every day. There's more and more initiatives. So how do we begin to interconnect them? How do we begin to improve coordination? And how do we begin to ensure that those initiatives are all feeding into this new digital compact? That's what we're trying to get out of UNEA. Marcel, do you want to add anything, given that Germany is one of the core event sponsors?
No, it's perfectly fine. I just inserted all the links and also give reference to the online document link again, if you want to include further comments also on structural matters. For example, some of you were talking about better buzzwords for all the different strategic priorities, for better understanding, for example. So this is also very valuable, just to make the communication, the understanding of the different terminologies better, enhance those.
And Marcel, can you put the registration link for UNEA in the chat as well?
It's already, I did that.
Okay, great. I'm seeing the landing page, but not necessarily the registration page.
The registration link directly.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you very much, David, and thanks, Marcel. And maybe we can, toward the end of the meeting, we can again put those links back in the chat for people's easy reference. And speaking of initiatives, which is what you were doing, David, just now, we're now going to actually move to looking at some of the initiatives that were included in the conclusion of the action plan. So there are, I think, a list of about 12 suggested initiatives there. And what we'd like to do is get your views on what should be the priorities for codes. So to do that, we have Reina Otsuka from the Nature, Climate and Energy team at UNDP, who will walk us through the initiatives and then take us through a Mentimeter prioritization as well. Over to you, Reina.
Great, thank you, Rob. Can you see my screen? Okay, great.
If you can enlarge it to full screen, that would be good.
Yes, thank you. So I will just briefly walk you through the 12 initiatives that are already written down in the conclusion section. Just as a note, this section is, you will notice that it is less finalized or close to finalization compared to the 3 shifts, because the three shifts went through a lot of consultation process last year. However, this one is more of an emerging set of ideas that are coming out of the consultation process. So please do be a little bit more critical about this one, and feel free to also type in any comments in the chat box. And David, I think in the Mentimeter, did we have a part where we can ask, everybody can type in, right? Okay, great, I see you nodding. So we will have a chance to do that in the Mentimeter as well. But if you notice anything, please do feel free to put it in the chat box already so that we have it in writings. So the key messages out of all of what we basically proposed as the three shifts, in order for all of those to happen, we need scalable actions and start now. We also need a very strong movement with some common commitments. We also know that we need a diverse leadership to capture this political opportunity window. And finally, we need to showcase some bold impact initiatives. And so we chose 12 initiatives. Again, it's only a proposal of a set of initiatives, which are supposed to be catalytic, global, and multi-stakeholder. So these are the three criteria that we want to put forward, and we would ask you to please rank it or value it at the end of this session. So based on these three criteria. And I will go through all of it. We won't chop it into the shifts and just go through the 12 initiatives right away. The first one is a World Commission on Sustainability in the Digital Age. This is basically to inform the Global Digital Compact that came up in the previous discussions. And it will basically provide a set of recommendations that can go into the Global Digital Compact in order to really feed into standards, infrastructure, and governance frameworks needed to harness these types of shifts. The second is, it says data as digital public good for sustainability. Basically, we all know that we need some kind of interoperability and data infrastructure that cuts across private and public sectors. And to do that, we feel that a multi-level framework and standards will be in need. So this activity or initiative is calling for such principles, development of principles, and an operationalization of principles. The third one is the Clearinghouse for Global Standards on Digital Sustainability. Again, this is about standards, but to aggregate and coordinate on these key standards that can actually be used for digital sustainability, and it should be developed by a range of actors. So this one is, again, it will be, and it starts from standards, and also it will be accompanied by capacity building of these standards. The fourth one is as education. So basically this is calling for a new international program that builds a common curriculum, a global science initiative and research agenda that results in exchange among policymakers. So this one is about education. It could also be expanded to capacity building, reflecting on how capacity building was big in the previous consultation processes. Moving on to the second shift, we have three initiatives listed here. The fifth one is the Sustainable Procurement Pledge for Digital Services and ICT. This one, again, looking back, that shift 2 is about greening our infrastructure. This is for a pledge that can be signed and pledged by private sector companies, as well as governments and civil society organizations, so that we can green the ICT infrastructure. The sixth one is Sustainable Digital Infrastructure Initiative. This one is calling to develop a roadmap that is specific to establishing a digital infrastructure. So I am talking as I am noticing that some of these might really be duplicating each other, and that is something that we would like for you to look into and provide inputs on. Number 7 is Sustainable Smart Livelihood Project. This one is more of a implementation of real-world laboratories for inclusive and sustainable initiatives on urban and rural smart livelihoods. And this will be more of a regional approach to actually formulate a network and also to start to implement in a coordinated manner. Under the third shift, we have actually 5 initiatives listed. The first is a sustainability cloud infrastructure for science-based sustainability targets. This is calling for governments to establish further incentives and regulations for businesses to adopt transparent and science-based targets for their sustainability and net zero goals. It also calls for the private sector companies to actually adopt, it's calling for at least 100 largest companies and to adopt this pledge or target in their actual businesses. The ninth one is sustainability by design standards and guidelines. This one is calling for a development of a set of guidelines so that it enables whoever that's working on these innovation can actually do it in an ethical and design thinking manner while making sure that it is environmentally sustainable. The 10th initiative is an intergovernmental platform on a sustainable digital age. This is calling for a scientifically driven transnational assessment process that provides a transparency on the social footprint or ecological footprint of digital goods, again, across the value chain, and then implement a forward-looking impact assessment for these impact. And it is also calling to establish a governance framework so that these lessons learned can be fed into similar initiatives. The 11th initiative is Digital Sustainability Innovation Hubs and Accelerator. This one is calling for a global and regional network of the many innovation hubs that exist so that we can coordinate and make sure that a lot of these innovation proposals are brought to the market. And finally, the 12th one is global and national funds and acceleration programs on digital innovation for sustainability. We know that there are several funds that actually try to tackle this digital environmental sustainability. This is again calling for a coordinated approach to mobilize at least $1 trillion of public innovation funds for digital sustainability and to work together so that the impact out of these financing is maximized. So these are the 12 initiatives. I will just go through before moving on to the Mentimeter. I know that some of you are asking in the chat box how to be involved or how can you actually be a part of these shifts. One thing we would like to ask you is to start submitting your initiative through Airtable. We have a form and I will put it in the chat box after this, but all of these are collected into one Airtable view, so that we can always come back and call out whenever there is initiative that's related to you. Okay, so that was a brief walkthrough, but we would love to go to the pulse check. And again, going back to the criteria, please do give us your opinion based on the 3 criteria. Is it catalytic? Is it, what was it? Is it global? Can it be undertaken globally? And does it trickle to change it at all level? And then finally, is it multi-stakeholder? Does it actually is it actually shared across a variety of actors by nature? So passing it to David to walk us through the Mentimeter.
Great, thank you, colleagues. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to vote, get your level of support for these different initiatives, and then we're going to get your feedback on, what's missing and what would you put in this initiative. Now, you can imagine the difficulty we've had as the co-champions. We have received hundreds of ideas from all the stakeholders and codes, and we're trying to kind of digest those into this action plan and into these impact initiatives. But it is really hard to sort of prioritize and to cut out ideas, basically. So we need your help to do that. How do we take these 12 initiatives and narrow it down? And what we really need to do going forward in the next 4 weeks is to understand who will lead each of these initiatives and by when will it be accomplished. And that's going to be the difficulty going ahead, I think, before UNEA, is getting agreement from different stakeholders on who will lead each one and what's the timeline. Now, just to clarify, the one we see right now, Clearinghouse for Global Standards on Digital Sustainability. The key thing here is that there are a lot of standards out there already, but they're not easily discoverable. If you do a search, you're not quite certain, how big this ecosystem is of standards. So we do need a single one-stop shop. I mean, ITU has been developing a whole series of standards, but so have others. And we need, to bring those together into a common platform so that they're easily discoverable, so we can identify the gaps, and so we can use it as the basis for resources for training and capacity building on those standards. So it looks like people are finished or finishing in the voting. I'm going to shift over now. Okay, so in shift one, if you were having to identify impact initiatives, are these the right ones, or do you have another idea? And I would welcome your ideas in this slide now. Other ideas for catalytic impact initiatives. What have we missed? Do you want to add anything to this list? Or here you can suggest what to remove. Are any of these really red herrings that should be taken out? So please, we're waiting for your feedback on shift one impact initiatives.
And I guess it's good to see if there's others that are doing this, or there's a formation of similar initiatives already. I think it will be very helpful if you can share that if you know.
I think I'm just going to comment on this one. This one is coming up in terms of obligations instead of pledges. I think obligations, we need to work towards, I think, this action plan, and eventually towards principles, and eventually towards some kind of political declaration. So I certainly think that is the North Star. But maybe it's too early to talk about obligations out of the gates. So maybe we work towards obligations going forward. And at the outset, commitments and pledges is probably the part of the pathway to get to obligations. But I certainly hope we can move in that direction. Lots of good ideas coming in. Please continue these. And again, the Google Doc will be open for further ideas that you might have on these impact initiatives. But already we're getting some really interesting ideas to supplement the list. And again, if you think any of these should be eliminated, that would be very helpful, again, to try to reduce the number rather than expand it. So we're going to move on to the next, which is shift two. 3 big ideas here. And there is actually a distinction between the first one and the second one. I mean, the first one is really about procurement, right? And how do we use public procurement and corporate procurement to incentivize the procurement of sustainable digital services and ICT. So that's kind of one idea. But the second one is really connecting to the Sustainable Digital Infrastructure Alliance. They have a roadmap in place already. And the question really is, can we augment that roadmap and internationalize it and globalize it so that it becomes a core North Star in this particular field? So it's really an open question. Can that be, internationalized, and how do we expand the current roadmap to be more inclusive and multi-stakeholder? So I think the voting is continuing. I'm going to give it a few more seconds, and then we'll move over to other ideas for impact initiatives in shift 2. And I'm aware that we're closing in on the hour and 50-minute mark, so I'm going to move over now to the shift 2 feedback on other ideas. Anything missing that you want to share with the group? I can see no ideas coming in. Oh, there we go. Is the Airtable link up? Yes, it is. And just for colleagues, the Airtable now reflects the annexes. So the annexes where we've been collecting ideas, we have transformed those annexes into an Airtable. And the idea there is eventually we will maintain and manage that inventory on the Code's website. And we will basically, the Airtable will become kind of a living document of every initiative that's working on the different shifts and the different strategic priorities, and it will be something we can keep updated. So that's certainly going to be part of the process going forward. I can see other comments coming in, mandatory disclosure and accounting. And that's an interesting one because, of course, the TCFD and the TNFD initiatives are moving in that direction, and we definitely need to influence and figure out how to connect into those. I think those are mentioned, but we can obviously try to augment that. I can see the role of ILO needs to be clarified. UNEP FI, absolutely. We've been discussing with UNEP FI what role it could play. I think that I'm not biased. I think UNEP FI is a great initiative, even though I'm from UNEP. I think it's a great initiative with a lot of potential here. So that's a good question. I think there's a lot of good ideas coming in, which is great. So let's move on to the final Mentimeter. vote, which is the final 5 in Shift 3, the final 5 impact initiatives. Again, please send in your feedback. I just wanted to clarify on the second one, sustainability by design, standards and guidelines for digital platforms. Again, what we see right now is a proliferation of platforms starting to move into this space. We see Amazon, we see Google, we see Twitter, but what we want to make sure is that the initiatives or the way that they're engaging, that there are common standards and guidelines on how they engage in digital sustainability, and in particular, how they can engage in sustainability by design of the platform, the user experience. How do they make sustainability kind of a core part of the experience? And we're, the idea there is to avoid kind of a fragmentation on what sustainability means by platform. That would be sort of a bad outcome, to have every different platform define itself what sustainability means. And is there a way to create some commonality across them and some core standards across them? It looks like we'll have to clarify a little bit more. What does the intergovernmental platform on a sustainable digital age actually mean, and what would it do? And we're happy to do that. But it looks like we have some fairly good support for the different impact initiatives. We're going to now move to the final slide, and then we will stop the Mentimeter. And this is really all about further ideas for impact initiatives in Shift 3. What have we missed? Or what would you like to call out as a good idea, or what should be eliminated? So please, the floor is open for further ideas. I think this is a really interesting point, the climate investment funds model. I mean, wherever you see good models, especially in terms of innovation financing, do let us know, and we can, again, not only put those in the annex, but also begin to look at them as potential funding models. Global Digital Citizen Project, definitely, I think that is something that we're trying to figure out where it fits. I think right now, it straddles a couple of different impact initiatives, but empowering citizens to be more sustainable through digital tools is definitely one of the big ideas we want to take forward. I'd like to know a little bit more about strategic collaboration. I mean, that's kind of inherent across everything we're doing. And if there's some further sort of what would an impact initiative look like around strategic collaboration, that would be great. But otherwise, keep these ideas flowing in. As I said, the Mentimeter will continue to be open after the session. So if you want to continue to put in ideas, we're going to send it to the full codes community as well, again, to get their feedback and to get their further ideas. And so this will be open to continue. Now, finally, just an open-ended comment slide. This is basically, again, how are we doing in terms of engaging the community? Was this process useful right now? How can we improve the engagement with the community? How do we make this more inclusive, more multi-stakeholder? This is really a chance for any final open-ended comments you want to send through. Please, the floor is open. Anything you want to tell us, any feedback, just put it into the session here. Thank you, colleagues. We've got a number of good, solid, concrete pieces of feedback coming in. Very, very helpful. We had assumed the colleagues had read the document in advance and would be ready, and that assumption might not be fully warranted, but hopefully we're going to keep, as I said, we're going to keep this open for another week. We're going to keep the Mentimeter open. We're going to keep the Thought Exchange open. We're going to keep the Google Doc open. So this is really, we will continue to receive feedback from you, and you can think about everything that's been presented today and continue to offer that constructive feedback. So hopefully this is not seen as the only point of engagement. It will continue for the next week. But this has been invaluable already to get a sense of how we have to continue. I think there's one question about the role of codes within the overall discussion. Ultimately, inside the digital cooperation framework and the roadmap on digital cooperation, sustainability, and in particular environmentally and socially sustainable development was missing. If you look at the different roundtables that came out of the roadmap, there was nothing on sustainability, and codes is now plugging that gap, trying to define what are these key issues with respect to digital sustainability, what are the key shifts and what are the priorities. And so codes is really trying to be that platform for this multi-stakeholder engagement, co-creating, co-defining these key shifts, co-defining these initiatives, and then hopefully catalyzing the implementation of the action plan. So continuing to provide that kind of convening role to bring colleagues together, to take forward the initiatives, to catalyze, to help coordinate, to help plug gaps, and to really monitor who's doing what. The heavy lifting will not be done by codes itself, but by the members of codes. Obviously, codes is meant to be this convening body and meant to be helping stakeholders interconnect and to take forward the action plan. But the heavy lifting will really be done by the members of codes, whether that's private sector, whether that's governments, whether that's UN agencies. We're trying to bring those actors together to improve coordination and basically implementation of these strategic priorities. Hopefully that answers part of the question, but thank you very much for this feedback. I'll stop the Mentimeter now and pass it back to Rob.
Thank you so much, David, and thank you, Reina. Fascinating comments coming through. And I think in the interest of time, because we have only 5 minutes left, and given that we've already had a fair bit of discussion interactively on the Mentimeter, I'm going to pass over to our final speaker, Jeffrey Bolton, who's a governing board member of the International Science Council, who's going to give a few final remarks for the meeting. Jeffrey, over to you, please.
Well, thanks, Robert. Excuse me if I stand back a little bit from what's been a valuable and a very detailed discussion during the last hour and a half. I've chosen this background slide as an image taken at Spitsbergen in 1965. Glaciers are the most reliable indices of the long-term change of climate. And the glacier you see here has, since 1965, lost 2/3 of its mass. In nature, this is a phenomenal rate of change. Such changes are currently happening at about 100 times the rate at which they occurred at the last time there was a major global warming, between 12,000 and about 8,000 years ago, as the last ice age came to an end. In most ecosystems, these rates of change are far too fast for organisms to adapt. Indeed, given the absence of real action in the human ecosystem, it seems that they're too fast for us too. Perhaps adaptation doesn't, in reality, seem to serve our self-interest, something we really have to change. Fortunately, we're also at the crest of a technological revolution, the digital revolution, that has enormous potential to help humanity cope with the challenges that it faces. CODIS is precisely designed to connect the two, the immense challenge of global change and human well-being, with the immense potential of the digital world. Most of this potential is, of course, currently reinforcing trends that run dramatically counter sustainability. So even the first priority is to reverse those trends. This focus of CODIS, of course, is part of a much larger enterprise to tackle a massive global task. Our work together so far has been to try to define what needs to be done to exploit the digital opportunity. But we're now moving to define how these things can be done, with the prospect of engaging with all the communities, political, business, NGO, science, and the different international and national initiatives under the umbrella of the United Nations. Stimulating mobilization of a global community is really a massive task in both scale and ambition, and will only succeed if we can catalyze exponentially some growing enthusiasms. There are some big issues at stake. Can we afford to be globally inclusive? Can we advance on the broad front of the SDGs, or will the environmental crisis force a sharper point of attack? Will we be able to redirect our effort when we make the inevitable mistakes? And of course, finally, it's difficult for a British person not to end on a quote from Shakespeare, that we should take the advice of Macbeth's wife to be bloody, bold, and resolute. So let's do that. Thanks, David and Robert.
Thank you, Jeffrey, for highly sobering and relevant words to close us off and to remind us, really, again, why are we doing this? Why are we here? Colleagues, I just want to thank you for joining. It's always remarkable to me to see the amount of engagement coming out of this community. It's just, for us, it also, as one of the chat comments noted, it also creates a little bit of a challenge to make sure we can kind of get everything in and try to align everything. But that's really what we're here for. We're trying to find common ground. We're trying to push forward for those directions that Jeffrey was just mentioning. Couple quick next steps. So as we've mentioned at different times during the meeting, the next step for this action plan is that we take into account the comments that have come through today in all the different forms. We will leave the Spark Blue consultation open again, and perhaps Reina or somebody can put in that address to make sure everyone has it. Then it's on to the UN Environment Assembly. That will be, there will be a side event talking about this action plan. Marcel, maybe you can also put in the addresses to the invitation and the registration links for that event as well, because you're all welcome to join for that. And we really just look forward to continuing to engage with you. I do just want to say a quick thanks to all of the participants from the co-champion organizations that are here and who spoke today, but also the army of people behind the scenes that haven't spoken today, but that have really worked to put all of this together, the action plan, make everything work properly and keep going. And so Nilufar Sabeh Kassouf from Future Earth, Mega Sood from the International Science Council, Fan Zhang from the Tech Envoy's office, and Marie-Ange Zipi from the UNDP development team, that's my team. And I just want to thank all of you for working so hard on this. With that, colleagues, we are on the half hour, and I wish you a very good continuation of your evening, morning, or afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Wonderful moderation, and see you soon, everybody. Bye.